Hello guys, today I will show you a supernatural American horror film called Unborn. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a woman named Casey and we can see her running in a park and she stops to rest and she spots gloves. She turns back and see a creepy young boy directly looking at her. Suddenly the boy disappears and instead we see a dog wearing a mask. Casey follows the dog into the trees and spots the same mask lying on the ground. She starts examining the mask and uncover a jar holding a human embryo inside, and the embryo suddenly opens his eyes and scares her. In the next scene we can see Casey babysitting her neighbor's kids while talking to her friend named Romy, and she tells her about the strange encounter. Her friend says that seeing babies are a sign of change and renewal, but she says that she doesn't know the meaning of the sign when a baby is kept in a jar. Then Casey asks for the meaning of seeing a dog and Romy says that dogs is seen as a messenger of the dead. After this, Romy asks about the two kids that Casey is babysitting. Suddenly Casey hears running sounds coming from upstairs and hears the elder kid named Maddie speaking something on baby monitor, so Casey goes up the stairs and checks the kids. She sees the elder one showing a mirror to the newborn baby and Casey confronts him and asks him what he was doing, but he doesn't reply. So Casey goes near Maddie and tells him to go to bed, but suddenly he smashes the mirror on her head and tells her that Jumpy wants to be born now. Later her neighbors arrive and they apologize for their son's behavior. Casey leaves their house in shock, and while on the way she sees the same glyphs lying on the road. Casey reaches her home and her dad asks if she wants some of cheesecake he is having, but Casey refuses his offer and heads to her room. In her room she washes up and goes to bed, but she hears a knock coming from her mirror, but when she opens it she doesn't see anything. In the next morning Casey cocks some eggs. When she opens an egg, an insect comes out and scares Casey, so she takes the pan and dumps it into the sink. She gets confused when she looks out the window and Maddie staring at her. Later Casey meets up with her friends and Romy tells her of a superstition that newborns should not see their own reflection in the mirror or they will die soon, but the group make fun of her for saying stuff like that. Later, we can see them attending a lecture and suddenly Casey's vision starts to blur and she sees the same creepy sentence, "Jumpy wants to be born," written on the board. She even sees the sentence written multiple times and written in her notebook. Suddenly she gets a vision of the embryo in the jar and an insect climbs on her hand and she leaves the lecture. In the next scene, Casey gets in shower and later in the changing room, Romy finds that something is wrong with Casey's eye and tells her to visit the doctor. So Casey visits a doctor and he explains that she might have heterochromia, that meaning one eye color is different from the other. Then the doctor says that it might be caused by a blunt force trauma and adds that on rare occasions it might be a malignant melanoma. Then the doctor inserted a speculum to keep her eye open and proceeds to take few pictures of her eye. Casey and her boyfriend Mark leave the hospital and she gives him some good news, saying that her dad is not going to be home until tomorrow. Suddenly she sees the same kids from her visions. WHI is standing across the road and staring right at her, but he soon disappears when a car passes by. In the next scene, Casey and her partner are lying on the bed and he asks her if she believes there's an afterlife, which she replies no. Casey gets upset and thinks about her past memory. We get to know that her mother was admitted to a mental asylum. Mark comforts her by giving her a massage. Later Casey looks into the mirror and notices her eyes have changed her color even more. When she leaves the restroom she hears a knock coming from the mirror and opens it, but she doesn't find anything in the mirror. She closes it. Before she even leaves she hears the knocking sounds again from the mirror, so she goes back and opens it, but this time she found the young boy screaming. Mark rushes in after hearing her screaming and she tells him about two boy, but when he opens it he doesn't found anyone on it. Casey gets tired of the shit and removes the mirror from her restroom. The next day Casey is running on her stroller and she stops near her neighbor's house. She sees people gathering around the house and one of them tells her that the baby was found dead. We find that the death of the infant further supports the superstition. Before leaving she once again finds Maddie staring at her through a window. Later that day she visits the doctor and he asks her if she is a twin, to which she says that she isn't, but the doctor advises her that she might want to see a genetic counselor just to be on the safer side. Casey visits her father and tells him about ERTI test results and she asks him if she had a twin. Her father admits that she had a twin brother years ago, but he had died while he was in the womb because Casey's umbilical cord strangled him. Casey gets frustrated after knowing this and asks him if that's reason why her mom killed herself, but her father denies the reason and says that her mother was clinically ill and says that's why she had committed suicide. Then Casey asks if her brother had a name, to which he replies that he and her late mother had nicknamed him Jumpy. In the next scene, Casey looks at the old photo albums of her family and notices a photo missing from the album, so she opens another file and finds some newspaper cutouts. In one of them she finds named Sophie Kozma. She look at the photo and see the same young boy from her visions standing beside her pregnant mother. The next day Casey and her friend Romy go together to find the woman named Sophie. They speak with the receptionist and she directs them to Sophie's room. While on the way, Romy sees an old man and says that she doesn't even want to get old. Sophie comes out of her room replaying that nobody wants to get old. She introduces the old man by telling them that his name is Walker and he had suffered a stroke which left him paralyzed from his waist down. Sophie invites them into her room and they find her room very homely. Casey notices an empty spot on the wall and asks about it. Sophie tells them that a mirror used to be there and she had asked it to be removed. To their surprise, she asks Casey if she is a twin, and Casey tells her that she had a twin brother but he had died in the womb, and tells her mother's name was Janet, and she shows Sophie the news cutting and the picture of her mother and asks her if she knew her mother. After looking at the picture, Sophie gets weird and tells them to get out. Later at the parking, Casey informs Romy that the newborn had died just like Romy's superstition. She also tells her that the neighbor's kid Maddie said the name Jumpy. Later at Casey's home, Mark starts an old film reel and they watch it together. Casey watches the film and tells Mark that it was the same asylum where her mother was admitted. Later that night they go to a nightclub and meet up with their friend, and Mark goes to the bar and Casey's vision blurs again and she sees the creepy kid and he suddenly screams. She gets scared and goes into the bathroom and suddenly she feels nauseous and start vomiting. She sees a hole in the wall and looks through it. Immediately many insects start coming out from it and swarm the place. She starts screaming and runs out but find the door locked. Many insects start coming out from all the pipes, and to Casey's shock her mother walks out from a stall. Casey starts screaming, even surroundings turn back to normal. Later that night Romy tells Casey to put a pair of scissors with the 2 points open under her pillow and says that her grandmother used to do this since it kept evil spirits away. Sometime later Casey wakes up and finds herself stuck to ceiling while seeing herself lying on the bed, and suddenly the creepy kid comes out from the bed sheet and starts open her stomach. Fortunately she wakes up and we can see that it's only a nightmare. A few moments later Sophie calls Casey and says that she has to say something really important to her. Casey visits Sophie the next day, and to her shock Casey learns that Sophie is her grandmother. Sophie further explains that as a child she had a twin brother named Barto and that they both were used in a Nazi experiment which was conducted by a doctor named Joseph. These experiments were conducted during World War II. She further adds that during one of the experiments her brother had died, but a few days later a demon named Dybbuk had entered her brother's body and used it as a portal to come into the world of living. So Sophie had to kill her own twin to stop the demon, and now the demon hunts her family for revenge. Then Sophie gives Casey a Hamza amulet and says that it is for protection, and she even instructs Casey to destroy all mirror and they burn the shards. Sophie refers to a man named Rabbi Joseph Sendak and says that he can perform a Jewish exorcism to exorcise out of Casey's soul. Later that day, Casey meets up with Sendak and tells him of her problems. Initially he does not believe Casey's story and tells her to go away, but in the next day he sees a dog with its head twisted upside down and realizes that Casey's story were true. Back at the retirement home the demon goes into Mr. Walker's body and kills Sophie. Casey learns that Romy may be in danger, so she and her boyfriend go to Romy's place to warn her, but unfortunately they are too late and the demon enters the body of Maddie and kills Romy. When Casey and Mark come inside they both see the demon and realize that it has gotten even stronger. In the next day Sendak introduces them to a priest named Arthur and they go to an abandoned place along with other volunteers to begin the exorcism. During the process the demon attacks them and kills several members, and the demon possesses the priest and begins to chase Casey and Mark. The demon catches up to them and starts attacking them. After quite a struggle Mark manages to knock out Arthur, but instead he gets possessed by the demon. Casey stabs Mark in the neck using the amulet and start running away finally. Sendak and Casey manage to successfully draw the demon out of the human world, but unfortunately Marks falls off the ledge and dies during the separation. A few days later she takes a pregnancy test and finds out that she is pregnant with Mark's twins. Here the movie is end. Please subscribe in the channel and don't forget to like the video.